What are you afraid of? Are you afraid to say it out loud that somehow that might come true? Or speaking of your fear might cause wheels to set in motion that will then run you over? Fear is a huge part of our lives, but like gravity, you can learn to use it to your advantage. For me, when I feel fear, usually, not always, but most of the time, that fear is a sign or a signal. A compass almost, sort of pointing me in the direction of where to go next. Fear can speak to you in a very small voice, or sometimes it might even be somebody else's voice. Now, when I feel that fear and I hear that voice, I respond back by saying, thank you. Thank you for pointing me on my way. Now, don't get carried away here, because fear can serve to protect you and save your life. Obviously, the fear emotion can cause the fear chemical in your brain to wake up your body and move you away from danger too. But really, the fear I'm talking about isn't life or death. It's more like do or don't. Will you, won't you? Will you go after your dreams, or will fear drag you down? Will you live on your terms, do what you want to do and be who you want to be and go where you want to go? Or will fear hold you back, tie you up in knots, and keep you right where you are? Use fear as a compass. Make your pro and con list, that's just fine. But in the face of fear, move in the direction where you feel the most fear and do that. Be that. Become the person who braves the wind, bucks the tide, and swims upstream. You'll find yourself on the other side of fear, like passing through a waterfall to the unseen. You'll find splendor. You will find yourself. Fear can be your friend. You were born to live on top of the world. I'm Chris Story, and this is On Top of the World Radio, live from Homer, Alaska. I'm Chris Story, along with David Webb today. Really good show. Awesome show. Today on the program, meet again, back to the show, both Charlie Pierce and Linda Hutchings, both mayoral candidates in the upcoming runoff election. Find out what is going on in their minds, and I've got a list of questions I intend to ask both candidates and see where the conversation goes. Blackwater Bed Espresso brings you your Alaskan Mind Bender. You could win one of 2 free coffee cards we'll be giving away. It's excellent. I'm really, I can't wait to hear what you've got to say about this question. It's that awesome. And TBC Radio brings you your word of the day, and a very special today and yesterday in history, brought to you by the Anchor River Inn. Don't go anywhere. We've got much more to come here from On Top of the World. Out of the night that covers me, black as the pit from pole to pole, I thank God for my unconquerable soul. In the fell clutch of circumstance, I have not winced nor cried aloud. Under the bludgeonings of chance, my head is bloodied but not bowed. Beyond this place of wrath and tears looms but the horror of the shade. And yet the menace of the years finds and shall find me unafraid. It matters not how strait the gate, how charged with punishments the scroll. I'm master of my fate. I'm captain of my soul.
Lend your voices only the sounds of freedom. No longer lend your strength to that which you wish to be free from.
You're listening to On Top of the World Radio, broadcast live today from Homer, Alaska, here at the corner of West Hill and the Sterling Highway, the home of story productions and all things possible and prosperous. Online on topoftheworldradio.com, on topoftheworldradio.com. Want to thank Horizon Satellite, Horizon Wireless, 226-3130. Call today. Find out what Leif and Cassandra have learned over the last 10 years, and that's how to provide incredibly fast wireless network capabilities to the internets and DirecTV and Dish Network up and down the peninsula. 226-3130. Horizon Satellite, Horizon Wireless.
And lend your voices only to sounds of freedom.
Celebrating freedom every day. I hope you're having an incredible day. David Webb is your engineer and producer, back up at the mothership of KGTL AM and FM and KPN FM 102. As I told you, Charlie Pierce and Linda Hutchings, both on the program today after the 1 o'clock news, going to be asking a series of questions that I think you would like to know answers to. California is about to legalize, wait for it, no, not marijuana, aquamation. Following this story, joining 14 other states that already allow for the remains of your loved one to be soaked in a vat of caustic chemicals that would dissolve everything except for the bones, and then they'll hand you back a crushed pile of bones that appear to be like ashes, and you can do with them as you please. I don't know why. I don't know. Maybe I've read too much, seen too many movies. I don't know. My imagination is so active on this one. I just find it off-putting. I mean, obviously, it's just another form of dealing with the remains. I just don't understand this. It's very interesting. Now, cremation is done at a 200-degree oven. Is that any different? I don't know. There's just something about aquamation that's not sitting well with me, and I worry that I would just kind of open my eyes as we're putting me into the tub. Go, wait a minute. No, it's too late. Sorry, Chris. This is happening. I don't like the idea. Hey, do you know why, incidentally, Ray Bradbury called his book Fahrenheit 451? Anybody know that? Little bonus point there. I'll hold on to that. You probably know. Just feel free to text in at 299-7653. It'll make us both feel good. Alaskan Mindbender brought to you by Blackwater Bend Espresso, not your average drip. Pat and the crew at Blackwater Bend Espresso are there for you early and late, and they're halfway between Homer and Anchor Point, and you're going to find the perfect cup of coffee every time. Road food, and may I suggest today you treat yourself to a Bender blender. Why not? Coffee and ice cream, that's the way God intended us to live, isn't it? Blackwater Bend Espresso. Blackwater means coffee. You know that. Blackwater means coffee. Blackwater Bend means gourmet coffee every time. Not your average drip. Here's your question, and this can send you out to Blackwater Bend for free. 2 coffee cards, $25 each in value. What is your best advice to a newcomer to Alaska on surviving the winter? 299-7653 at 299-7653. What is your best advice to a newcomer coming to Alaska on how to survive the winter? 299-7653. Raymond is the winner. Raymond knew that Ray Bradbury, in fact, discovered that paper and books essentially burn at 451 degrees Fahrenheit. Ray, you get a very special gift. It'll be in the mail to you. No need to send me your address. I know where you live. So, yeah, what advice would you give somebody coming to Alaska that on surviving the upcoming winter? As you know, winter's coming. I don't know about taking a personal inventory on the air with you here today, but I thought that maybe what we would do is, if you can't tell, there's a theme to today's show, and it's upbeat, it's positive, it's. I just think there's a lot going on in the world. There always has been. We'll touch on that during our Today in History, brought to you by Anchor River Inn. But there is always so much going on. There's always something to be afraid of. There's always something to hold you back. There's always something to be concerned about. I suggest and submit to you today that you could solve every problem in your life in an instant simply by taking a personal inventory. I mean, when I say solve, I don't mean that resolve instantly, but I think you can solve for the problem and feel a sense of burden lifted, sense of relief almost instantly. And here's what I suggest. We follow the Chinese proverb, when's the best time to plant a tree? 20 years ago. When's the next best time? Right now. Right now. All right, well then let's do that. Where you are with what you've got. Going into winter, going into this last quarter of the year, going into darkness a lot. Newcomers to Alaska, by the way, it will get dark. If you can always tell when somebody's new when they start looking around at 4 o'clock, like, what happened? Where'd the sun go? It's gone. It'll be back tomorrow, midday, for another couple of hours. But it's time to take, I think, personal inventory. And I would suggest you start by addressing a few things. Maybe 5 different things go on your personal inventory list. And starting with personal skills. You have skills. You've got a whole host of skills. You have a lifetime. However old you are, you have a lifetime of skills. I would include everything from tying your shoes to reading to talking, walking, running, whatever it is you do. Add that to your list. Add that to your personal inventory. You've got skills galore. You have skills that somebody coming from, say, a non-English speaking country would only dream of. You see that, right? Where a waiter in a restaurant coming from Bulgaria is actually a doctor in their own country, but here they don't have the same skill set to achieve that. You have got a boatload of skills. So write them down. Keep an inventory. Number 2, your relationships. You've got incredible relationships. You've got infinite relationships, but you've got, even if you think, maybe I don't have the kind of friends, I don't, have as many friends. Maybe you're new here and you don't have as many friends or associates, but I suggest that you do. And I hope you count me among them. And I get a lot of text messages from people just at random different times, not just during the show. And I know you're there, and I know that you count me as a friend, and I count you as a friend. I consider this relationship to be very important to me. But there are others. You have other relationships, and there's value there. I wouldn't trade them for $1. A couple. I trade for a couple bucks, but mostly my relationships I'd consider to be priceless. And then thirdly, your assets. You literally have more assets today in actual value and use value than even just 2 generations ago could have dreamed of. The power of the assets you hold today and at their relative costs are, I don't want to say priceless because there is a price for them, but at the same time, extremely valuable. What assets do you have? And aspirations, I think, should go on our inventory list. Our personal inventory list. I think our aspirations matter. I think our aspirations are unique and they're our own. These are the things that drive us. It's that inner drive, what you aspire to. Put that on your personal inventory list. And then finally, past accomplishments. I don't want you to live on your laurels. I don't live on mine. You shouldn't do that. I'm not recommending that. I'm suggesting, though, you look and see what's already been done in your life, what you've already done, and take a minute and just acknowledge that. And it kind of ties back into skills, personal skills, but it's things you've accomplished. And be careful about the things that you want, that you now have, as they say, are things you once dreamt of having, but maybe we take it a little bit for granted. As you think about your personal inventory, I want to expose you to a little bit of what I do pretty much on a daily basis. I either read or listen to something positive for at least an hour every single day. I call it my hour of power when I wake up, and it could include people like Les Brown.
If you died today, what dreams, what ideas, what gifts, what talents, what voice, what stories will die with you?
See, a lot of people go to work every day miserable, and all they do is just talk about how miserable they are, but they don't do anything about it. You know that you're deliberately operating below your potential. You've gotten comfortable. You stop expanding. You stop stretching. You stop challenging yourself. It's hard living. Life is hard. So most people don't use their imaginations. Most people don't dream anymore. Why? Because through the conditioning process of life, after so many rejections, see, you know what you can do. You know what you have done, and you also have seen what has been done by others in your environment and by others in your circumstances. Then you look at where you want to go, and what most people do, they do that which they feel they know that can work because they've already done it or they've seen it done. And so they allow their negative history to determine the possibilities for them. And so when they run into a roadblock, even if they have something beyond their comfort zone, when they run into a roadblock, something happens to them. Most people allow life to control them and their circumstances. Look into the future. What is it you want? What is it you'd like to create for you? You want to make your dream come true, you got to stay focused. Some people rather get even than get ahead. Stay focused on where you want to go. This is not going to be it for my life. I deserve more than this. See, that will start making you do some stuff.
See, you can't go wrong with Les Brown. How can you have a bad day when you start your day with somebody like the unconquerable Les Brown? It's time for your Word of the Day, brought to you by TBC Radio. Radio is the original social media. Get the word out about your business on the radio with TBC Radio. Talk to your customers directly in your own backyard by calling TBC Radio at 803-9424. Call Josiah with TBC at 803-9424. Here is your Word of the Day. Spontaneous. Performed or occurring as a result of a sudden inner impulse or inclination without premeditation or external stimulus. Spontaneous. Rather simple word. I like it used in this sentence. Spontaneous acts of kindness cause the entire community to heal from an awful tragedy. Spontaneous acts of kindness. Question for you. And this really made me stop and think this morning when I had selected this word. In the pre-dawn hours, I selected this word as the TBC Radio Word of the Day. And I said to myself, Chris, when is the last time you did something spontaneously kind for somebody else? And I stopped and I thought. Now, I'd like to think, well, I could say that it was, well, of course, this is, again, pre-dawn hours this morning. I'd like to say, well, it was 4:30 yesterday, say, Chris. It was 2:22 yesterday afternoon, I remember. And maybe opening the door, I would count that. I do that as often as I can, you know what I'm saying? But I mean, really, sincerely, a spontaneous act of real kindness. When was the last time fine, let's count door opening as a spontaneous act of kindness, because I do think that counts, or a smile, or just making somebody feel important in a moment where they otherwise might not. But I'm curious. Add that to your list. Would you? 299-7653. What was the last spontaneous act of kindness you performed? And or the question of the day from Alaskan Mindbender, Blackwater Bend Espresso. What's the best advice you've got to a newcomer to Alaska on surviving the upcoming winter? Because guess what? It's coming. Today in History is coming just around the corner, and some quotes from Mother Teresa and a segment of the program we're calling Book Notes when we return here to the top of the world. Today in History brought to you by the Anchor River Inn online, anchorriverinn.com. World-class fishing, views, beaches, Anchor Point. Come to play. Stay for dinner at the Anchor River Inn. For more than 50 years, the Anchor River Inn has been making history in Anchor Point. You know, they really are the heartbeat of Anchor Point. I want to thank Jesse Klutz and family, great Americans, great Patriots, and great Alaskans. Thank you for keeping the inn at the heart of Anchor Point. Today, that's right, today it was in 1931, this happened.
Chicago gangland boss Al Capone, alias Scarface, is arrested by federal prosecutors. Famed for the St. Valentine's Day massacre of Bugsy Moran's gang, he is also responsible for many other gang war bloodbaths. However, Capone managed to slip free of such charges in court. Upon moving from Brooklyn in 1920, he rose from a two-bit bootlegger to the undisputed warlord of Chicago gangsters. But a federal judge finally sentenced him to 11 years for, of all things, tax evasion.
Isn't that how they got Wesley Snipes, too? Finally, we were able to bring down the actor for tax evasion. Crazy. Well, and if you're a sports fan, you no doubt remember Game 3 of the 1989 World Series.
Andy Maldonado with the hesitation, allowing Jose Canseco to score, and he fails to get Dave Parker at second base, so the Oakland A's take.
I'll tell you what, we're having an
That's right. It was an earthquake measuring 7.1 on the Richter scale struck Northern California, killed 67 people that day, causing $7 billion worth of damage on October 17th, 1989. British forces under General John Burgoyne surrendered to American troops in Saratoga, New York, a turning point in the Revolutionary War, 1777. That happened today. Think about that. Happened today. 1979, Mother Teresa of India was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize for her work on behalf of the destitute in Calcutta. And not to be outdone, yesterday in history, 33 years ago to the day, David Webb, a.k.a. the Eagle, walked into the broadcast studios of KGTL. Happy anniversary to our very own David the Eagle Webb. Thanks, buddy, and thanks for all you do. We appreciate you. Mother Teresa said, peace begins with a smile. Okay. You can't argue with Mother Teresa, can you? I think it also can include a smile painted at the end of a missile sometimes, unfortunately, but that's the reality of today's world. She also said, be faithful in small things, and this I love. Be faithful in small things because it is in them that your strength lies. The small things. Be faithful to the small things. That's where your strength lies. Mother Teresa said something else that I liked. Loneliness and the feeling of not being wanted. That's the most terrible poverty on earth. How true is that? It's 56 minutes after 12 o'clock. After the 1 o'clock news, Charlie Pierce, mayoral candidate, and Linda Hutchings, mayoral candidate, will individually be here answering my questions. I came up with some questions that I felt you would want to know answers to. And so I've got about a half a dozen questions or so that I want to go into with both of those candidates. That's after the 1 o'clock news. So stick around. If you've got a friend that's confused or don't really know yourself maybe which way you're going to vote, find out. And that's why I want to ask the same questions of each candidate separately and find out individually what they feel about some of these things. We're going to talk about taxes. We're going to talk about the direction of the state, and we're going to talk about priorities if elected as your borough mayor, as your leader of this borough the size of Rhode Island. I think it matters. Book notes brought to you by Latitude 59 from the crew of The Little Mermaid. Latitude with a whole new attitude at the mall at Ulmer's and BayRealtyAlaska.com. Since 1974, rentals, homes, and land at 235-6183, BayRealtyAlaska.com. What am I reading? Well, on my bookshelf, I grabbed this for you. It's from Maxwell Maltz, Psycho-Cybernetics. Psycho-Cybernetics. And I wanted to read this. I think it fits into the theme of today's program. Decide what you want, not what you don't want. Maxwell Maltz, he was a noted plastic surgeon. I mean, the biggest in the country, truthfully. I mean, he really was the most famous, the most successful plastic surgeon. Now, don't just think in terms of Hollywood. Think in terms of cosmetic reconstructive surgery as well. So it's a valued thing here. He said, it is the job of the conscious, rational thought to decide what you want, select the goals you wish to achieve, and concentrate on those rather than on what you do not want. To spend time and effort concentrating on what you do not want is not rational. When President Eisenhower was General Eisenhower in World War II, he was asked what would have happened, what would the effect have been on the Allied if the invading troops had been thrown back into the ocean and the beaches there at Italy. And he said, it would have been very bad, he said, but I never allow my mind to think that way. Never. And why should you? Why should I? Why should we allow negative thoughts to enter our mind and we steer toward, I don't want to hit the wall. I don't want to hit the wall. You're going to hit the wall. Stop looking at the wall. Stop thinking about the wall. You're going to hit it. So look at where you want to go. It's no different in driving as in life. It's the same thing. You're driving me crazy. Alaskans are getting fatter, apparently. Alaskan obesity is on the rise. From 1991 to 2015, the study of 8,000 Alaskans shows we're at nearly 30% obesity. That's up from 13.4%. 1991. 13.4% today is nearly 30%. So I once coined a phrase, and I'll stand by this, Walktober. I was thinking if we did a Walktober where all of us just walk more and more and more starting in October. I like that, right? Hey, Chris Story along with David Webb. Much more to come from On Top of the World, including Charlie Pierce and Linda Hutchings. Don't go anywhere.
May God bless and keep you always. May your wishes all come true. May you always do for others and let others do for you. May you build a ladder to the stars and climb on every rung, and may you stay forever young. May you stay forever young. May you grow up to be righteous. May you grow up to be true.
You were born to live on top of the world. I'm Chris Story along with David Webb, and this is On Top of the World Radio, live from Homer, Alaska, what my mom calls the greatest show on earth. In just a moment, I want to introduce you to Linda Hutchings. I'm going to ask her some questions. She, as you know, is in a runoff election against Charlie Pierce for borough mayor. Let's find out what Linda's got to say about a few different issues. First, it's time for your Alaskan Mindbender question, brought to you by Blackwater Bend Espresso, halfway between Homer and Anchor Point, not your average drip. Question: what's your best advice to a newcomer to Alaska on surviving winter? At 299-7653. Linda Hutchings, welcome back to the show. How do you answer that, Linda? Let's throw you a curveball right away. How do you suggest to somebody moving to Alaska how do you best prepare yourself to survive a winter here?
Well, if it were me and I was worried about that, I'd start becoming involved in my community. There are so many not-for-profits and church groups that have so many things going for them and always need volunteers.
All right. That's actually a very good answer. All right. Well, we're off to a good start. Linda Hutchings, as you know, is in a runoff election against Charlie Pierce. And Linda, I just thought I would ask you and Charlie separately a series of questions and let the voters hear for themselves kind of maybe what separates you from each other. Let me start with that question then. How would you say you are different, or what separates you from our current administration, and that would be led by Mike Navarre? What's the difference between you two, do you think, and what separates you?
Well, I think probably Mike and I, you must know that Mike and I have been friends since we were children. So it's a family connection with all of the pioneers that came to this area and worked together. So I respect Mike. I will tell you that we do not always agree politically, but we have conversations so that I feel that we can work through that. And I just think the real difference between me and Mr. Pierce is the fact that Mr. Pierce has worked for a public utility for profit for his 30-some years. He's never really balanced a budget like a small business person would, having to meet payroll, having to make taxes, having to live within their budget. And I think this speaks very highly of my qualifications, and I've worked for many, many years in the automotive industry, before that in trucking. So I'm quite aware of how different businesses have to handle, whether it's unions that they're working with or whether it's just sole proprietors or small corporations. I've also been on a lot of not-for-profit boards, currently sit on 2. And I've also worked many, many years, 11 years actually, for the state of Alaska on the Workers' Comp Board, developing regulations to reduce premiums to employers, and which actually I work very well with the union side of that, because we would do town halls, and if a company couldn't afford the premiums, then the union workers didn't get to come out to work. So we work really, really well. I'm a consensus builder, not a divider.
All right, and I'm talking with Linda Hutchings, running for borough mayor. You're listening to On Top of the World Radio. Dale Bagley, as you know, came in third in a 3-person race. That means last. But he hasn't endorsed anybody. He hasn't endorsed yourself or Charlie Pierce. Did that surprise you or take you by surprise at all?
Not at all. Mr. Bagley doesn't endorse anybody.
Okay, so that's just par for the course in your opinion.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Let's touch on some statewide issues. And we don't have, obviously, all day or all legislative year, as the governor would like to have it, to discuss some of these things. And that would be topping the list, SB 91. Just briefly, from what you know about that Senate bill that has, in a lot of people's estimation, increased crime level around the state, what is your just sort of brief off the top about SB 91?
It needs to be fixed. We have a car dealership. We do service work. We do repairs. We sell vehicles. And one day, David was sitting here. It was on a Saturday, and David is my husband, and he saw this car drive to the back of the lot, and he said, well, I wonder what they're up to. So we went back there, and here was a man with a jump box to jump a car, and another lady with him that was siphoning fuel out of another vehicle. So he called the police. The police came down. They couldn't really do too much because it wasn't enough of a crime or whatever. So they let them go with a slap on the wrist. We made sure that, our gates were locked. But the next day, the policeman called David and said, "Thank you for calling us," because later that day, that same person was driving a stolen vehicle, and they were able to arrest him at that time because it was a large enough crime. So, yes, we definitely need some work on SB 91. I was not pleased with how that came out.
Governor Walker is asking for the legislature to come back and discuss what he's now calling a payroll tax. It's just another name for an income tax. Where do you stand on solving the state's budget crisis or problem or spending problem, as it were, with an income tax? Should Alaskans be paying that?
I'm extremely torn on that. My problem is that I think there are some things that we need to look at beforehand. But, I've been here a long time. I know what it was like to pay an income tax. I know what it was like to pay a school head tax. And sometimes I think that we need to reassess where we're going and what we're doing.
Resources. Obviously, there's not a lot that can be influenced from the borough mayor's office relative to ANWR and or the state gas line. But what do you think about expanding the development of Alaskan resources in general? Where do you stand on that?
I think where we are right now is fine. I think we need to, it's not going to do any good to expand the resources if you're still getting $50 a barrel, because it just doesn't pencil. So I think that the gas line is something that I would love to see happen, because I think that there is a big Asian market for us in that respect. So gas line, yes, I'm holding off on anything else.
Quick inlet tax credits. Did you see a benefit to those, or was that money ill spent?
Well, I wouldn't say that I know that much about the Cook Inlet tax credits. I do know quite a bit about the credits in Bristol Bay, because I have some very good friends that fish over there, and they were pleased with how the credits came. If you put the icing systems into your boats, you still had to pay your tax, but you got some credit against that. So it made it very worthwhile. They were able to sell more fish to the processors because their fish were kept cold and saleable.
You maybe have already answered this. By the way, you're listening to On Top of the World Radio. My guest today is Linda Hutchings. And Linda, you may have already answered this in a roundabout sort of way, but I want to ask it this way and see what you think. In your opinion, this is just your opinion, are Alaskans paying their fair share? And I include in that property taxes and or any other fees for service or taxes in general.
Well, every state is different. I had a gentleman in here the other day and said, if I get any more taxes, I'm moving to Wyoming because their tax base is lower. I think we should try really hard to live within our means and get through this recession and see how things are going. Things are getting a little better, but right now I'm not for adding any more taxes.
Okay. If elected, Linda, what would be I want to characterize this, because I know that there's a lot of things that have to take place in a transition, so I don't necessarily mean like literally moving stuff into the office. But what would be your first move, or maybe your number one top priority if elected to borough mayor?
Well, I have two top priorities, and one, of course, is we have a real problem with our HVAC system, and I would be out there. I know there are not state and federal grants right now, but there are green grants and there are safety grants and there are private sector. And I think that there's a way to work on that. I've worked on grants for different not-for-profits that I've worked with. And there are opportunities out there. It might not be for the whole thing, but at least it'll be a portion of it. And then the other thing I want to do, since I'm an accounting person and computers are my strength, I would streamline some of the processes in the borough, payroll, purchase orders, this type of thing. Besides sitting down with all of the department heads and having them, we'll discuss, we'll have conversations, what we can do better, if there's deficiencies that can be found. So I'm looking forward to that.
And Soldotna, and this is not maybe a borough-wide issue, but it's going to affect definitely the center of the peninsula, and that would be the Soldotna annexation, the potential to expand at Soldotna. Where do you stand on that issue?
Well, first of all, it probably doesn't have too much to do with me, but I will say this about the annexation. There are study groups, not a lot of the people that are upset about annexation aren't even in the study groups. And some people want to be annexed. So I think what they need to do is they need to go to the hearings that are offered, all the meetings, so the comments can be made and recorded, and then they go to the Boundary Commission, and the Boundary Commission is the one that reviews it and sends it back to the city for them to review again.
And I guess lastly, Linda Hutchings, my question would be twofold. I'll just fold these two questions into one, and that would be, who would be, at this point from where you sit, who would be your chief of staff, and question mark around the mayoral staff in general? Would you increase or decrease the department that you'd be operating?
I believe it would probably stay the same until the total transition is taken care of, so I can assess each one of the departments. And as far as the chief of staff, I have not made a choice yet.
So I'm in the running then, is what you're saying. There's still a chance. All right. Chris Story, chief of staff. All right. Linda Hutchings, thank you so much, and wish you all the best. And I just would give you maybe a final, if you've got a maybe 30 or 40 seconds, you want to just make a final pitch to the voters, I'd give you the floor.
Well, thank you very much, Chris, for this opportunity. And, you know, my big thing is education, healthcare, and the economy. I am more than qualified. I have worked with up to 82 people at one time. I have a great relationship with employees that have worked for us. I still have a couple employees that are 27-year veterans. And I just feel that I'm the right person for the job. I have the management skills, and I have done so much for communities on this peninsula. So I'm invested in them, as were my family and a lot of our pioneers. So I really want this chance, and I hope that I get it. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you, Linda Hutchings, for Borough Mayor. Coming up, Charlie Pierce will hear what he's got to say here on Top of the World. Don't go anywhere.
Another turning point, a fork stuck in the road. Time grabs you by the wrist, directs you where to go. So make the best of this test and don't ask why. It's not a question but a lesson learned in time. It's something unpredictable, but in the end is right. I hope you had the time of your life.
You know, nobody so far has said get out of Alaska. Well, I take that back. Somebody did. Somebody said fly south, fly south. Well, what's your best advice for newcomers to Alaska, a.k.a. Chicacos? Isn't that Chicago? Chicano. Chicago? I think I've just offended somebody. It's not Chicano, it's Chicago, on surviving the winter. What do you suggest? How do they survive the winter in Alaska? 299-7653. Text in your answer. Here with me now, Mr. Charlie Pierce, running for Kenai Peninsula Borough Mayor. Charlie, I guess let me start with you the same way then. What do you think? What's your best advice for somebody new to Alaska? How do they survive a winter here?
I think I'd make sure I have a good coat. A good coat and a warm pair of shoes.
Man, that is practical advice.
Yeah, good common sense, practical advice. No, I think we have a lot to offer in Alaska, and it's the, what do they call it, the last frontier, and there's a lot of adventures here. So I would just encourage them to be patient and enjoy the adventure and get to know folks, and make sure folks get to know them as well.
Now, as you know, you're listening to On Top of the World Radio. Linda Hutchings was our guest just a moment ago. Now we have her opponent. That would be Charlie Pierce for Borough Mayor. We're in a runoff. We got an election coming up next Tuesday, and we have an opportunity. Charlie, I'd like to give you an opportunity to talk about what separates you from the current administration, i.e. Mike Navarro's Borough Mayor. What separates you from him?
Well, this race we always say that this race is nonpartisan, but I think that what I want to do is maybe talk a little bit about the philosophical beliefs that each of us have. And I think Mike has grown up in a democratic world, and I've grown up in a more conservative Republican world. And I think that those are the fundamentally we have some real differences in regards to prioritizing spending, needs versus wants, and what do they call it? The sharing of the wealth, I guess. And I think he and I differ on a number of those issues.
if elected, it sounds like there'd be a divergence somewhat of what has been the status quo thus far.
Well, I think it's fair to say that as I've campaigned, what the word that I hear from the street, the message that I'm receiving is they want me to look at things. They want me to go in and just make sure we're doing things right. And I certainly plan to do that.
Dale Bagley, in this three-way race, came in last and has decided not to endorse either candidate. Did that take you by surprise?
I was somewhat surprised about that. I reached out to Dale and tried to encourage him to get on board. Before we even ran, I had a phone call with Mr. Bagley and encouraged him to get on the Team Charlie effort and join us. Dale has a lot to offer, and I'm thankful that he's on the assembly. And I was surprised that he made a personal choice to not get involved, and I respect that.
You're listening to On Top of the World Radio. I'm Chris Story, joined now by Charlie Pierce, running for Kenai Peninsula Borough Mayor. Charlie, I want to go through a bit of a lightning round with some statewide issues, and starting with crime. What is your opinion on SB 91? A lot of people purport it to be the causation of so much of an increase in crime that we see around the state. Your thoughts?
Well, it was a cost-saving measure for sure, and I'm sure it has saved the state a considerable amount of money. But however, it's created a huge amount of losses on personal property from those folks that are out there actually creating taking part in a number of incidents and issues. But I'll give you an example. We live in Sterling, and in the subdivision I live in, 4 homes were broken into last week. And while talking with the officer that responded to one of the homes, he mentioned that the individual that was responsible for the break-ins was out. He had 3 days earlier had broken into a home, and so he was already back out on the street. So it sounds like it's a revolving door. There's some efforts in the 53 to go in and make some adjustments to that, tighten those provisions up so that the judges can actually remand individuals for a longer period of time. So I'm hopeful that I've heard the Senate has passed the version of the bill, and the House needs to go in and do their homework and take care of it as well. So I hope they get that done during their special session.
Let's move on to state income tax, or what the governor has so carefully masked as a payroll tax. What do you think on that? You think Alaskans ought to be or should be paying some sort of an income tax, no matter how you call it?
Well, listen, I've mentioned it right here at home on our borough mayor. His proposal to fix the $4 million deficit was new revenue via taxes on us residents, and the governor's doing the same thing. First thing out of the saddle when they started talking about the budget issues at the state last year. Remember last session, first thing out of Malott and governor's program or plan is to taxes. They've been talking about taxes since they started talking about the resolve of the issues that they're trying to handle. And I think the Senate, again, was steadfast, stood back and said, no, there's really another way to do this. And I think that, look at the savings that we have, over $50 billion in savings. And if we just take it and invest it differently, we could generate new revenue for the state, not from royalties on oil, but from our own savings that we currently have. And I'm hopeful that the House and the Senate will take a look at that and make some provision changes in how the permanent fund is invested. And then secondly, I think that the governor could avoid a taxation by making some additional cuts in the cost of doing business. And, they talk that they've cut the budget 40%. But I think in that formula, one of the things that they include in there is all the capital projects they've cut as well. Go in and cut your operating budget 40% and then tell me you've cut your budget. Tell the folks, be genuine before you come to the Alaskans and say, you need to pay another income tax for those people that are working. So the working hands that are working today, this proposal will take a little bit more of your income to help pay for the business at hand. And I'm at odds with the governor on his proposal, and I hope that the representatives that go to Juneau are at odds with him as well.
Let's talk about resources, and there's not a lot within the control of the Kenai Peninsula Borough and or the mayor's office. We know that, but your philosophy towards resource development, gas line and or ANWR, what are your thoughts there?
Well, I think we should develop it. I think that capital investment in this area is a good investment. I think we need a strong tax policy, a consistent tax policy, so that the industry that operates in Alaska has some predictability and can put some business plans together so that they can calculate a return on their investment. No one's going to come into the state of Alaska invest here unless we have a stable long-term policy, and we need to develop that. We've bounced around with tax policy for the last 5-6 sessions, and there's no wonder we're sitting here with 500,000 barrels of oil a day in our pipeline, and 2/3 empty, and then we're wondering why we're having revenue issues. You produce more oil even at $50 a barrel. You just need to produce more of it to offset some of your revenue challenges. So I'm a guy that's sitting back to say, let's produce more, let's develop more. And even if you start today on a field, you start the plans and start drilling today, it's going to take several years to bring that production online. And so I say any development today is good development.
We've already sort of touched on this by way of talking about the state and or payroll income tax. Let me ask you this, though. In your opinion, Charlie Pierce, are Alaskans paying their fair share, call it taxes, real estate taxes, sales tax in general? Are we paying our fair share, in your opinion?
I'm of the opinion that when you put the mix of the permanent fund, the recent changes with the permanent fund into the mix, I'd say we are. $2,200 in the last couple of years has been taken from us in the way of a permanent fund. And then those that live here in this area pay property tax. There's sales tax. There's a number of user fees, taxes. You're a guide and you have people sitting in your boat, you pay per seat tax. You've got some bed tax provisions that are actually out there where you have folks that come and stay in your home, and I think that there's a variety of taxes that we're paying, and the message is, you may feel that we are or we aren't. I don't really think that that's the issue, Chris. I think if you're listening to the way folks vote and where they go into the ballot box, we just had a tax cap, raise it from 5 to 1,000, and that's one that I could actually support. I think I could wrap my hands around that. I kind of I'm a consumer kind of guy, and I think that sales tax, consumption tax is the way I would rather see it. I would prefer that over property tax. But I'd say that if you're listening to the message from the voters, as they want to see some responsibility in government, and they want government to demonstrate how they're trying to save and defer spending and get by during the recession, and not just balance or as I've stated, tax spend cycle. They're interested in seeing some results and some performance out of government, and I plan to work hard to do just that.
If elected,
demonstrate that.
Yeah, thank you. If elected, Charlie Pierce, what's your first move? And as I said before, and I don't mean like transition, bring in a pasteboard box of stuff. I mean, what would be your first move after a reasonable period of time for transition? What's your, say, number one top priority?
Oh, man, I got a bunch of them I want to do. I'm very excited about this. I think that, I think what I'll do is I'll start that review of the budget process right away. Certainly, I'm going to spend some time on the get to know you. I think it's important that the leadership gets to know the folks that are doing all the hard work every day, and I want to develop a supportive relationship with the staff, and so that'll be a priority as well. But definitely get to work and start looking at a line by line item of that budget. Put a team of individuals together and task them with going in and identifying some perhaps areas where we might be able to do a better job.
It's not a completely borough-wide issue, but I do want to touch on it, and that is the Soldotna annexation topic. Where do you stand on that?
Well, I think I've been pretty clear about it. My opponent has pushed this issue, and has been supportive of the annexations, worked on a number of committees, and spent some time on trying to justify the process, and certainly has avoided talking about it much and prefers to do that. But I want to stay. I think I've been pretty comfortable about it and pretty clear about it. I think that if you're living in the borough and the city of Soldotna and any governing agency for that matter comes in and wants to include you in the governance, the change in governance. And remember, when you change ownership or you change governances, you bring their policies and their procedures with them and their taxation with it as well. In the borough, you got a higher mill rate than the city of Soldotna, so you'd have an initial cost savings, but would that last? Be careful what you wish for. My position on it has always been make sure that whatever you're doing there, that you have an opportunity to vote on it if you're going to be affected, and not just have the city council or the commissions or boards that oversee these things make these arbitrary decisions.
All right, Charlie, just quickly, would you be increasing, I'm just running out of time, is the reason I say quickly, would you be increasing the mayoral staff or decreasing it, and who do you know, if you know at this time, would be your chief of staff?
We're going to decrease the number of individuals in the mayor's office. We're going to go from 5. Mayor Navarre has 5, including himself, down to 3. So there'll be a net savings of 2 positions right away. And, I'm excited about my chief of staff. I'm working with an individual that I think will the community will find very approachable, very well respected, very talented individual, and I'm not at liberty at this time to announce it just yet. But okay. I'm excited. I'm looking forward to very, very soon announcing who I'll be working alongside as my chief of staff. In
consideration that I'm up against the clock, I'm going to give you the same 30-second floor to make your last pitch to the voters. Charlie Pierce.
Thank you. I've stated it in the campaign that it's not about the past. It truly is about the future. If you're okay with how things have gone for you down in Homer, if you're listening, taxation on your property, if you're okay with that, I want you to really think about who you vote for. Consider that there's an individual that'll definitely look at those concerns and make changes for you. I served 6 years on the Borough Assembly. I mentioned I've been a manager at a company that schools you every day on being efficient and looking for savings. I spent 39 years there. I'm an operations guy. I'm a true manager. I've been trained as a manager. I've got a lot of success stories, and I'm ready to go to work. On day one, I'm going to be off and running, and I hope that you'll take the time to go vote. 24th is going to be a big day for this peninsula. It's a very important day, and I hope you'll take the time to go and vote and be very thoughtful in the process of who you select.
Thank you very much, Charlie. I appreciate you being here today.
Chris. Thanks a lot.
All right. Don't go anywhere. We'll have the final concluding moments of On Top of the World Radio in just a moment. Stand by. I want to thank Gail Maggie and Joanne Daniels, both winners of today's Alaskan Mindbender, brought to you by Blackwater Bend Espresso. And some of the best advice for Chichacos, not Chicanos, Chichacos, moving to Alaska to survive winter. What's the best advice? Well, I want to read this one to you. Best advice for Chichacos would be get out and play. Embrace the surrounding beauty and participate in outside activities such as snow machining, skiing, snowshoeing, etc. Also, a lot of you advised vitamin D. Only a couple people said get out. That was more, I didn't take it as like the poltergeist, like get out. I think it was more like get out and play and or get out and fly to somewhere warm once in a while. And I think that is very good advice. Stay busy. Enjoy the beautiful sunny days every minute. We do get a few of those up here. A lot of you said vitamin D, stay busy, have a hobby. Yeah, great stuff. So I also want to thank Linda Hutchings and Charlie Pierce running for borough mayor. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of personal sacrifice to run for office such as this. And now we're down into overtime. We've got a upcoming election next Tuesday to break a tie. Well, not quite a tie, but to determine in a runoff. I suggest that we all get out and vote, and let's do that. Let's live on top of the world. You matter. You, my friend, were born with a purpose and on purpose. Happy anniversary to Mr. David Webb, and we'll see you Thursday on Radio News.